is the best way to help guide players through my levels? And the answer to that question is through landmarks. There are several, well, more than several, there are a lot of different kinds of landmarks that players can use to help, that designers can use to help players find their way through their spaces, and stay orientated, continue to find their way to all the important bits of the playable space. One example is Weenies. You can take a look here at some pictures that I've assembled. Weenies is a term that was originally coined by Disneyland Imagineers. And weenies in Disneyland are tall, skinny pieces of geometry that stretch up above the sight line of the other surrounding elements in the layout of the park that people can see from a long distance off. So, for example, you can see the mountains at Adventureland, you can see the Matterhorn, you can see Sleeping Beauty's castle, or even Space Mountain. And the thing that's nice about that kind of a landmark is that because it rises up over the sight line of everything else that's in space, if you're far away from it, you can see it and say, oh, that must be the entrance to Adventureland, or that must be the Matterhorn. And that helps you to orientate yourself and to help you move your way through, in this case, the level, which is Disneyland. But that's just one kind of landmark. But as an example, let me just show you, and pro designers use a lot of different kinds of landmarks when they're assembling their spaces. But let me just give you an example, because I show you the Disneyland weenies, and we see this nice, clear, kind of explicit picture. Take a look at this. Here are some weenies from video games, probably games that you even recognize. There's Halo, for example. There's BioShock Infinite. There's Half-Life. You can see these tall, skinny landmarks that are sticking up into the air that are useful for players to be able to orient themselves and to be able to figure out, okay, where am I in the space? Have I been here before, or which direction is it that I want to be headed? So this is the kind of long-winded way of basically saying you want to use landmarks to help your players be able to find their way through the spaces in the level, and weenies are one type of landmark that you can rely on to be able to do that. Okay, next question. What makes a map flow well? This is a great question. And of course, answering that and addressing that is a very tricky problem. I got a lot of this. How do I make it so that players can flow through my spaces? It's related to the question of how do I keep players from getting lost? So let's talk about flow just a little bit. Related to the question of landmarks, landmarks are related to the answer for overall flow through a space. So a good way to approach building fundamental flow in your levels is to first think about the structure of the space, then think about the stages of the encounters that you're building, and then think about the landmarks that the player is moving past. So what I mean by that is, as far as the structure of the space is concerned, you want to try to make sure that as the player is moving through the space, it makes sense that the structure of the level is designed in such a way so that the basic kind of fundamental building blocks of the level are leading the player where you want them to go. Here's a flow map for a level that you may or may not have played. If you've played any of my work on Halo, you've seen this. This is a simplified map of Blood Gulch, a flow map for Blood Gulch that had the two bases at either end of a box canyon. And the fundamental form of Blood Gulch is designed to create good flow for the player. So you'll see that it, if you're just kind of looking at it, it makes a figure eight. The two bases are at either end of the box canyon, and as players are flowing through the canyon, they'll circle around those two bases, and they'll run into the box cannon at either end, and then they'll be kind of cycled back into the action. And then there's a ridge line at the, a high ridge line, which is at the top of this flow map, where the player can kind of go up over the action. And there's a set of caves where the player can kind of go down under the action. But in both of those cases, they also still flow back into that central circulating figure eight pattern. So going back to this first slide, think about the structure of your level and make sure that the structure is set up in such a way so that a player is not going to get lost. They're not going to get, it's less likely that they're going to get lost or get stuck because the level is flowing through, flowing from one place that you want them to go into the next. Part two, encounter stages. It's useful always if you're trying to wrestle with flow and you want players to be able to find their way through your space, is think about how your players meet the encounters in your level. Presentation, the entry point, the gameplay, and the exit. Those four stages are of critical importance to being able to build good flow for the player. And that's a useful technique. So if you're trying to build good flow, first think about structure, second think about your encounter stages, and then third think about the landmarks in your level.